This is not a test. Now is the time to panic.
If Trump attempts to weaponize the justice system against his political opponents with Matt Gaetz at the helm, we could see incoming Senator Adam Schiff as our shadow attorney general.
First up, the homeowners putting outfits on rodents, hoping the government will come over and get rid of them for free. Next, after failing its 7th audit, the Pentagon has decided to take it as an incomplete and promises to spend more money on tutors to pass next year. When pressed about the dirty audit, they responded, hey, the president doesn't even have clean underwear. Members of Congress have expressed outrage at the money the auditors are charging to not find where the money is going, leading some congressmen calling for hiring a new team to help claw back the funds, while others are insisting on a new branch to oversee the second set of auditors and a raise if they all agree to say nothing at all. Next up, Johnson says he has not talked to Trump about Matt Gaetz' report, not once, and then repeated it a 3rd time to let you know he truly doesn't even know what you're talking about. And lastly, the Asians looking to solve disputes with dance.
It's your daily dose of misinformation, pulled from a lightly hemorrhoided asshole. It's today's Run Your Mouth!
To them unless you think it's true. Follow your heart and your dreams. Follow your heart and your dreams.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the Run Your Mouth podcast. We have exclusive access to the bathrooms here in Congress for the world's biggest news stories. I know there's World War III. I know people are concerned with Trump cabinet picks, but finally, Congress is getting back to the important work and solving the crisis inside of our bathrooms. Who can use them? Why do they get to use them? We're going to get into it. But before we do have some nonsense that we'd like to discuss because that's what we do at the top of the show. We do solve the world's problems. We get into all the news. We let people know the important issues, but we do talk about some stupid bullshit to start the show because stupid bullshit's important. It's important too. Every day of our lives, we have to deal with stupid bullshit. A lot of times, we can't influence the actual politics that's going on. Sure, we can be right about everything. Sure, we can holler at the internet, try and acquire an even larger audience that more and more people can sit around in the afternoon and go, you know, that Rob Bernstein guy was right. And that's all you can do in life, is even if the world goes to shit, they torch the thing and we get into World War III, hopefully in the afterlife, you can walk around and go, you know, I was right on that one. And that's all. And is there any better sensation? Is there any better sensation from people that haven't found the success that they're looking for? Is at least just being able to walk around and go, I was right. It's a pretty good feeling. So anyways, before we get into all of those topics, let's talk about some stupid horseshit, which is first is I'm enjoying my new car. Very rarely do I actually purchase something and then not just lean it up against the wall of my apartment, realize that it wasn't what I wanted, and then just let it collect increasingly more space. And then, what am I going to become have a whole second job of eBaying the things that I purchased that I'm never going to, and then I don't return anything ever. Never going to return anything. It doesn't happen. I don't know how to return stuff. Doesn't matter what I ordered. Doesn't matter what you sent to my house. It is staying. It becomes wall decorations at some point. At some point, what you got to do is you got to get yourself a nice case for the thing that you purchased that you're never going to use, and you slap it onto your wall and you pretend like it was an art piece. And then it becomes an art exhibit of the shit you purchased on Amazon that you're never going to use, you don't need, and you don't even want within your apartment. And then what you got to do is become increasingly more successful so that you have more room for the shit that you didn't need to take up increasingly more space within your home. You know, I don't like shopping. I particularly don't like going into a store. I don't like trying on clothes, but I do like buying things on sale. And so then that's what happens is you see something on sale on the internet and you go, hey, I want that. And then it takes you end up spending the same amount of money as just showing up to a store and trying shit on because you buy things 4 times until you find something that you're actually going to use. And it just increasingly takes up more and more space. If you ever want to come to the museum exhibit of shit that I've purchased on the internet that now just sits against the walls of my apartment, because as a single man, you can collect as much shit as you want that you purchased for a discount on the internet and slap it against your walls. But anyways, there you go. John Popek gets it. Robbie's fine gallery of useless purchases. Maybe it'd be funny to pull that off in your shitty residential building. All the neighbors are wondering, hey, what's going on over there? Is he doing a tag sale from an apartment building? And you're like, no, it's just a museum exhibit of the shit I've purchased and never use. But anyways, I did buy a car. I'm enjoying the car. And what's funny about the new car is that I'm trying to keep it from becoming a storage unit. My last car was a storage unit. You had all the porch store supplies. Sometimes you swapped out the porch store supplies for the rollerblades I never wear because I don't play roller hockey anymore. But for 5 years, you know what I kept in that car? I kept a hockey stick right to the left and the rollerblades in the back as if I was ready for a pickup roller hockey game that was never going to happen and I was never going to play. But I had trail running shoes that I never used. I had a skateboard I was never on. The amount of supplies that I was ready to go camping. If the world came to an end, the worthless shit that I was now. And by the way, I specifically bought leather seats. I even said to the sales lady, I was like, I'm a dirty individual. I need leather seats. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I eat a lot of food in the car. Like the last time I vacuumed a car, I was embarrassed by how many sprinkles I found between the seats. You're not supposed to have a party's worth of sprinkles. It's not supposed to look like you were thought that you were getting into baking and that you were going to bake a cake and that the entire bag of sprinkles opened and then you were so lazy. Like, you know what I mean? It's like the people that smoke cigarettes and they just never throw them out. And then at some point you look at the room of all the cigarette butts and you're like, my God, just think, if that's what the cigarette butts look like, can you imagine what your lungs look like? My last car was like that with sprinkles. So now I'm like, nothing goes into this car. Nothing goes into here. But then, so you're like, well, I need a pair of sunglasses and I need my actual glasses and I need some gum. If I'm going to be drinking and getting pulled over, you need some gum. Oh, and I need the registration papers. I need that. And slowly but surely, it's the war against clutter and the car becoming a storage unit. I should start my own gambling website of stupid horseshit bets for the Run Your Mouth fans of the over-under until the car just becomes because at some point you give up. At some point there's one thing, you bring it into the car and you're like, I'm not bringing that upstairs, or I use that enough. It just makes sense to keep in the car. And then once you cross that line where it's no longer just empty and new, then it's no longer empty and new and you're just driving a storage unit. All right, before we get into other news stories, I've been enjoying this one that, we've got all this glut in government. You've got RFK Jr. and Elon Musk saying that they're going to start firing everybody just randomly by their social security numbers. No performance reviews. No effort to try and keep them best amongst the people. Just look at the social security number and tell them that they got to go. Let's just assume that they're all worthless and inefficient and that there's no variance amongst the government employees. So, what's the best way to get rid of them is just at random. And then every once in a while, I read in the newspaper that, Matt Gaetz is going to be hired, and then all these people are going to quit. And it's like, great. It sounds like you're going to threaten me with a favor. So the people that disagree with the incoming administration will just leave voluntarily so we can get the people out that don't agree with what we're trying to accomplish. I say we as if I'm actually a part of this administration, and I don't want to take ownership over what these people are doing. Let me backtrack that to just saying if people want to quit their government posts, they were probably the worst at those jobs if they're nervous about these placements. This one's funny. So you got this new guy from Fox News who my guess is if they actually go to war and needs to make decisions, isn't going to make any decisions. But he's coming in there as, hey, we're firing all these woke generals. We're getting rid of all these practices. We're going to make sure if a woman's in the military, she actually knows how to do a push-up. And so now they're freaking out. Everyone's like, well, if this guy's coming in, I'm leaving. Good. You're probably the person he wanted to fire anyways. So you're going to self-select me as the person that was going to be most annoying for getting rid of the woke people? Quit threatening me with favors. All right, let's get into some important news topics, and thank you to YoKratom.com, home of the $60 kilo and the only place on the entire internet where you can get an entire kilo of kratom for just $60. So first up, we did just wrap up this election. We do have important news topics, and luckily Congress is getting back to the important work of deciding where and when men can take shits in the ladies' restroom. This is a pressing issue amongst our country. This is when we finally get into the meat of the situation, is what people are depositing and where they deposit it. Are you telling me we can't get a single porta potty in the budget? We actually have to be having this conversation publicly. And what, do you got to become a senator where you get your own private bathroom in your office? Is this Nancy Mace lady really sitting in the stalls next to MTG? Who's using the bathroom at work? You guys show up every once in a while to have to pass something. You're telling me you guys are actually dropping loads while you're doing congressional work? You would think. You take that little subway in, you say present, you make your vote, you get the hell out of there, and then you stop working. How much time are you guys spending at the bathroom at work? Do you guys have nice bathrooms? You're telling me we can't just get one individual bathroom for this new class of people? And just let them, and I'm not trying to make it a special, make it a nicer bathroom with even extra tampons for the men that became women who really want to have the experience. You're telling me we can't just get one private restroom that anyone can use and just move on? Or is that's going to be the one with the line? I mean, how much restroom access is actually happening here? Well, anyways, these are the fun stories. So I hope that this one just stays in the news forever. Where you get this pretty lady, Nancy Mace, just screaming, she doesn't take shits like the rest of us. The other women in Congress, even the fat ones, they're dropping clean turds. But I'm listening to what this lady's throwing out of her anus, and that's not lady shits. And for me to have to take a shit before I'm passing a bill and having to smell what's coming out of this man. Oh, I forgot to put up the article. I'm yelling, and you guys don't even know what I'm talking about. So you got this new trans or lady. I don't care. You're an adult. If you live in an area that's into this and you're a transition person and you want to work in Congress, God bless. I've got no problem with any of this. As to how, though, this escalates to actually making the news and having to be a conversation is ridiculous. I mean, you guys have all of the budget in the world. Drop one less bomb in Russia and pay for the private bathrooms so that this person can just use their own restroom and we don't have to actually even have this conversation. Marjorie Taylor Greene getting out there with her raspy voice going, you wouldn't believe the turds coming out of this lady. Why are we having this conversation? AOC going, you guys aren't being compassionate. She drops turds just like the rest of us. I've sat next to these Republican ladies that work out like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it smells way worse than what this lady's depositing in a toilet. Get up there with the mallet and you go, or evaluate the turds. That would be fun. That would be fun. Someone actually collects it and brings it out and goes, I would like to showcase in front of Congress the turds that are being dropped by the average woman in Congress. And look at what this lady's depositing. And we can't have this while we're trying to use the restroom between bills. And then you got Mike Johnson, who's just trying to pretend like he's a nice Christian. And he's going to have to get up there and go, we got together as a committee, and we decided that if you've transitioned into being a lady, as long as your wiener is under 3 inches, you're allowed to use the women's restroom, because amongst Congress, we all agree that that's practically a lady. And then they bring her out, and they measure it, or they have to actually transition into being a full lady. I mean, can we get this together? Can we figure out this one? How is this one top news on the day? I mean, I'm here for it. If this is the only thing that they want to discuss, we can make this the entire Run Your Mouth program as we try and cover what's important in the United States of America and the top issues that are facing our nation. And so, yeah, I guess, listen, instead of evaluating whether or not we got a guy with dementia who's trying to escalate World War III, this is more fun. Talking about who gets to shit where in the Congressional building, that is more fun. All right, next up, because we're not going to do a whole show on that. Speaking of shits, the lady that Donald Trump hired to be the new press secretary could literally drop one in my mouth. You got to love the way Donald Trump casts, where he's like, get me some wholesome looking American lady with some Hawk 2 energy. Except that's not who she is. It's like central casting out of Fox News. She talks aggressive. I don't know how she wasn't an anchor on Fox News. But I do like the way that that he seems to be casting. And then let's get into this picture, because speaking of dropping dumps and where you take dumps, how good are the bathrooms on Donald Trump's plane that late in the evening, 60-year-old men can just be pounding McDonald's late at night? That's the most fascinating part about Donald Trump. I wish I could eat this way. And who eats this way not drunk? Like, I understand, you go to the UFC and you get hammered. Firstly, if you're already at the event and you're at Madison Square Garden and you're good with eating McDonald's, I feel like the concession stuff of what they'll just hand you in the better seats is probably better. You could have been ordering sandwiches to your seats, and apparently you're not concerned about where you got to use the restroom. So what, is this like third round of dinner that you're telling me that you didn't eat all night, that you then had to get on the plane and be like, we got no food, we might as well pick up some McDonald's? Who on the Donald Trump team is the McDonald's staff that just goes out and makes sure that, is that one position? Is there some guy that when Donald Trump gets into office, he's got his McDonald's runner? It's like having an intern. Or does he have a fancy butler that goes and does it? I just see Donald Trump being like Richie Rich, where despite all the wealth, it's the greatest pitch for McDonald's, because if I was this wealthy, I mean, I would have a guy who cooked incredible sandwiches and burgers. I would be a snob about it. And I'm not like a snob where I'm like, get me the grass-fed, organic, well-cooked steak. Like, I would still eat shitty food, but it would be shitty food that wasn't McDonald's. It would be big, juicy, quality hamburgers. Like, I would want some fat Samoan man who somehow got clearance to run a barbecue pit on my jet. That's the way that I would go about it. But you gotta like Donald Trump's everyman attitude. And yeah, someone was pointing out Donald Trump Jr. did have the hilarious tweet, which was "Make America Healthy Again starts tomorrow," which I already said on a previous episode. What's finally going to get RFK Jr. is when Donald Trump bites into a French fries, goes, "Why is this so floppy? What did RFK do to the French fries? These used to be crispy. Make my French fries crispy again. Get rid of that guy. He's ruining my French fries. They used to be delicious. RFK ruined my French fries. That's it. We're going back. Make the fries delicious again." RFK Jr. does look reluctant, though. I guess they didn't feed him all night. They get onto the plane, and they're like, "We're eating McDonald's." And he's like, "All right, I'll be one of the boys." And I like how Mike Johnson just picks his head up at the last. "Hey, guys, I'm here, too. Hey, you think I can get a little leftovers? I'm part of the club. I'm hanging out here also, guys. Don't forget about me. If you're taking a picture for the Instagram, I want to be one of the cool kids." Next up, Spririt Airlines files for bankruptcy. How will it affect your travel plans? Well, it won't, because if you were flying Spririt Airlines, it was because you didn't want to actually see your relatives. I'd like to see the CEO actually get up in front of the country and go, for all those people saying that they're concerned about whether or not their planes are going to fly, our core customer are people that did not want to actually go home. And so they say, "Hey, I'm coming home. I was able to afford a flight. I got the big seat on Spririt Airlines." And that is specifically reserved for people that don't like their families and don't want to actually go home. So if you were planning on pretending like you were flying Spririt Airlines, it is still there so that you can pretend like you were flying it. I would like to know, if you guys are going bankrupt, can I get my bag back first? Can I have it back? I mean, if you guys are shutting down the company anyways, you probably don't need my bag. Maybe you could just like send it to me. And actually, this concerns me, because after experiencing Spririt Airlines and knowing that they don't actually fly planes and that they're just there to aggravate you and steal your energy, I understand that they were an organization run by demons and they had no interest in profits. They did have an interest in hiring the loud urban people. And so you have to give them credit for that. Not everybody likes hiring aggressive women from the urban community, and Spririt Airlines was there for it. They said, if we're going to be here, ushering people around, taking their money, not putting them on planes, upcharging them for things, we're going to need aggressive people who can handle this. It was like the inverse of Patrice O'Neal's incredible bit of black women will get you refunds. Spririt Airlines listened to that and was like, that's who we need when we're stealing everybody's money and not actually putting them on planes. We're going to need people. We're going to need, we can't have Indians doing customer service. We're going to need someone a little bit more aggressive that can shame people into just walking away as we don't put them on planes and we take their money. And then we tell them, oh, don't worry, there's a customer service line over there. And then you walk out of it, and then it's just the exit. And you're like, all right, you got me on that one. I'm not going to go back through security to wait on the line over there to try and rehash the conversation I was having. That was a good one. Hey, it's just through that door over there. We understand the problem that you're having, that we just put you on 3 planes that won't be flying and that you just want your bag back. And if you just go through that door right there, you'll find the customer service department only to find out it's the exit. That was a funny move. You got to give credit to Spririt Airlines on that one. Anyways, but now this concerns me because as an educated consumer, I realized as long as I avoid Spririt Airlines, I can avoid these demon people who only exist to try and harness my energy. And with Spririt Airlines going out of business, what is the new scheme that they're going to cook up where they pretend like they run a service, but they don't actually do anything and they're there just to annoy you? They're going to need to make up their energy deficit somewhere. So if Spririt Airlines is no longer the place available to them to harness our energy, what product or service am I going to experience that was as horrible? These are the kind of things that you have to concern yourself with. Next up, we've got Russia says Ukraine attacked it using U.S. long-range missiles, signals it's ready for a nuclear response. Even NBC News here is going full Alex Jones. We're headed to nuclear war. Even NBC News is going with the most alarming version of this storyline. For those that don't know what's going on here, it's very simple. The U.S. is doing a going out of war sale. And when you're having a getting out of war sale, you got to drop all the bombs that you can. You made your promises to the war machine. You made your promises to the deep state. You put billions of dollars out there and you said that you were going to spend it. And they can't be shipping these missiles back home. Well, this is our last chance to escalate these things and use all the things so that you can print the profit. So it's a getting out of war sale. And we got to make sure, how is it legal that a dude with dementia that just got voted out of office is allowed to escalate a war? If you've been voted out of office for your last 3 months, you chill, you give your child a pardon, you eat more ice cream, you sniff some kids, you take your naps, how is it possible that you can be voted out of office and be escalating a war? They got to make a law against that. That should not be allowed. You shouldn't be allowed to be at the end of your term voted out of office and escalating wars. I think we can all just agree on that. And that's the problem with people with dementia. I experienced it with my grandfather where, sometimes you would bring him back from family dinner. He'd be sitting in his chair and then you'd go, have a good night. And he'd be like, good night. I thought we were going to family dinner. And that's probably what happened with Biden here is they woke him up from a nap and he was like, we got to go bomb them. And they're like, dude, the war's over. And he's like, no, we're first getting started. Use the missiles. That's the way you start a war. What do you mean the war's over? Sir, you just lost the election. This is my first day here. And I promised the deep state people I was working for that we were going to have a war with the Ukraine. So we're not dropping bombs now. We just got this thing started. And then, of course, this comes after he was literally just wandered off into the woods. Hey, Hunter, are you in there? Hey, maybe it's some of those people going through the rainforest trying to get into the country. I can help them with directions. Or it was just, if I'm out in the woods, and you're an old man, you're just like, I'm gonna go pee in the woods. Someone turn off the cameras. All right. And then this I'd mentioned on part of the problem the other day. Someone in the comments, I read the comments, I like the comments, pointed out that I was being suckered by this North Korea storyline and that it wasn't true. But the gist of what I was saying was accurate. And essentially, here, this is from the New York Times. The Russian military is launching a major assault by an estimated 50,000 soldiers, including North Korean troops, on dug-in Ukrainian positions in Kursk with the goal of retaking all of the Russian territory that the Ukrainians seized in August. The Ukrainians could use the AT-ACMS missiles to strike Russia and North Korea's troop concentrations, key pieces of military equipment, logistic nodes, ammunition depots, and supply lines deep inside Russia. It seems to me, based off of what we were reading last week, with even Zelensky going, hey, this new administration has a better plan, which is talking. Apparently, we could just sit down and we could hash this out instead of spending a lot of money so that the kids in my country can die. He was like, listen, I called up Donald Trump and he said I could still have my war check if I just let the war be over and we stop having our kids die. And apparently that will work better for everybody. But it appears to me that they know the war's coming to an end. So Putin's like, you know what? Let's go take back our territory so that we don't have to trade that to them when we negotiate. And Biden trying to save face a little bit as we end up in the exact same place we were years ago with Russia, with more territory inside of Ukraine, and so as part of the peace deal, and people dying, and us having spent a lot of money for no reason. It would appear to me that they're doing the best they can to try and save face. And so they are escalating the situation, I guess, hoping that maybe that leads to a little more leverage for when the negotiations come. But obviously, it's a stupid game. Now, quick video from Matt Gaetz, who appeared on the Timcast. And these are the moments that you see Matt Gaetz, and you're like, this is why I kind of like the guy. And then we'll get into the conversation about what happened with the ethics committee and the supposed sexual relations he had with a 17-year-old. But let's talk about the positive Matt Gaetz first. Are you guys back letting me know that there's no sound? Yes, you are. And I actually know how to fix it today. Let's play it again. And Matt, I see that you're there. We're going to get to you in a second. I got 2 videos to play, but there's sound. Don't you guys worry. I'm going to be bold right now. I'm going to put it into the universe, and I'm going to manifest sound by pressing play now. And with this confidence that there will be sound, we will have sound.
I think that the reason we are as involved in Ukraine as we are is because Afghanistan wound down. And if we still had Afghanistan to launder money through, there probably wouldn't be the need for this type of excessive involvement in Ukraine. But I think we can look at Afghanistan and we can look at what's going on here and say what a lot of these defense contractors are pushing toward is how to have an extended kind of low yield war. Like if there's a way to stretch this thing out, turn it into a 20, 30 year kind of thing where there's a whole lot of money moving around and unaccountable pots and a lot of weapons getting bought. And then, oh man, the stockpiles, well, we got to spend more money to reload those.
So those are the moments where you have to actually like Matt Gaetz. Dare I use the word of the children and call him based, where he's a straight shooter. He will say the things that's on all of our minds, where it's refreshing to hear someone in politics actually go after the deep state, go after the FBI, go after Merrick Garland, say the stuff in the most aggressive way, which is also just the most straightforward way, and call it out for what it is and say, listen, there's no reason for this war. It's not a strategic benefit for us. It's because certain individuals want their profits. And as long as we can have these ongoing wars where Americans don't have to fight and die, then they can continue to make their money. And so it's the moments like that where you see videos like that with Matt Gaetz where you're like, this guy actually gets it. He's aggressive enough that he's willing to state the things that you wish every politician would just own and state. And then when politicians state this, it reinforces that it's not just conspiracy kooks. I think it's important to have voices inside the government actually saying the things that we all know to be true. But then you get the storyline of, well, this guy had, sexual intercourse with kids, which obviously we're all against. You're not allowed to do that. We don't even need to say that. We all know that you're not supposed to be doing that and that we don't endorse that. I do not have a consistent policy for how to view government investigations. Because, for example, the Hunter Biden investigation, Hunter Biden did not end up in real legal trouble. And it seemed to me that there was a cover-up with the IRS and the investigators where they tried to run out the clock and they tried to cut him a sweetheart deal that even a judge threw out to cover up the crimes of the Biden family, and that perhaps he was the window in to really investigating Joe Biden, potentially finding out how the criminal enterprise works, who's bribing our leaders, whether or not there are profits happening just for war and literally laundering money back to yourself, important things. And so sometimes I'm a sucker for the storyline of, hey, the deep state, they're covering their own tracks and people aren't getting in trouble because the investigations are flawed. And for example, we have yet to even prosecute Fauci. And so, you know, you could stand on the sideline and go, well, if there was illegal behavior, it should be prosecuted. And the fact that it wasn't prosecuted would be evidence of the fact that nothing happened that was wrong. But then you take the Donald Trump one where they said, oh, there was still evidence of Russia collusion. It's like, no, you investigated the guy for 2 years and then you guys came back and you didn't have enough evidence to actually move forward to the next step. Well, that's not proof of vindication. So we do have a bit of a problem here because I'm on the side of these sexual assault cases seem to be a very good way of silencing individuals, getting them to step down. No one likes having these stories about them. And I think just having accusations out there should not be enough. For example, I mean, we saw it with with comedians. They lost like their TV shows just because of accusations that never escalated to investigations or anyone being in trouble. And that seems to me to be a dangerous standard within society where accusations just imply guilt. And so in this case, I guess he stepped down early enough that the report doesn't need to be published. It's also unclear to me if the 17-year-old actually testified or if just two hookers that he had sex with said it. I think one of them was even found out to be not credible. I didn't read into all the details of this. I'm going off the headlines here because I'm more speaking to the overarching problem of government investigations. If that, like, what is the standard? Do we look at it, hey, if it doesn't move forward and someone's actually not found guilty, the point of courts is that you should be able to, the accusation shouldn't stand unless it proves guilt. But then when this stuff happens on the left, I'm the first one to say, hey, that was just a cover-up. So I do not have a clear standard here. But, you know, anyone who's being paid for sex cannot be a great witness. I mean, you're literally a whore. What are you going to do? Call them a whore? That's what they are. They're literal whores. That's not a crazy, like, so the same way that he paid them for sex, I'm sure someone else could have paid them to give bad testimony. So the fact that if that's the extent of the accusation is that two whores that Matt Gaetz paid for sex at some point in time, which, by, you know, I'm not even paying whores. I don't think Congress people should be paying for whores. I would understand if people go, hey, we'd like to have better individuals representing us. And yeah, that's all. But I guess maybe the conversation should be about the criminal behavior of why are people going to jail for prostitution if our congressmen enjoy prostitution? These are all accurate and fair questions. I guess I'm getting at, there's a difficulty here when you have people that are otherwise you think a force for good, and then they're the ones being silenced. I'll throw it to the chat. I don't know what you guys think of this, because there certainly are government investigations where I go, yeah, well, that was a bullshit investigation and they were covering up for that individual. And then you've got other ones where I guess it's the people that you're rooting for, where you're like, no, it's because he's one of the good guys and the deep state's going after them with fake accusations. And there's not a clear logical standard there. So I don't have that much to say other than Matt Gaetz has great moments where he seems to be a voice for good and a bulldog in terms of his ability and willingness to pursue topics that others won't, with the clarity there of just going, hey, they're laundering money back to themselves. Like, that's an important voice. As to whether or not they tried to silence him with fake accusations, or for some reason a congressman is able to engage in this behavior, which, like, I don't understand, why wouldn't that lead to a criminal investigation? Like, especially here, if you have a clear testimony of that a person had sex with a 17-year-old, shouldn't that lead to a criminal investigation? And then if there wasn't criminal behavior, shouldn't that then just be the end of that? But that's where my OCD sends me in circles of why can't we just have one clear standard? All right, and now a quick video from Gavin Newsom talking about how much California has done to address the homeless problem within California. And then we will take some comments. And then we've got As the Meter Turns returning to the show with some more insights about how we can profit off of nuclear energy and where our government is heading with its energy policies. Before we play this video, let's thank our other sponsor for today's show, Sheath.com. Dude, if you have not upgraded to Sheath, if you're still walking around and you've got your sweaty underwear that creeps up your butthole, that's giving you wedgies, that's creating unwanted sweat between your legs, and you're living with the friction of your thighs rubbing against each other, there's a better way. And it's at cheat.com using promo code RYM, where you can get yourself 20% off the greatest underwear that's ever graced the balls of man. And if you haven't yet upgraded, and buy some for your lady. They got some sexy lady clothes. You've got Christmas shopping coming up. You've got old men in your life with long, sweaty, saggy nuts. You've got fat guys who have their thighs chafing together. And you've got a hot wife that you'd like to see in some sexy outfits. And you know where you can correct all those problems? You go to sheet.com, use promo code RYM, and you get yourself 20% off the greatest underwear that's ever graced the balls of man. And now let's listen to one of our fine leaders out of the Democratic Party leading the state in California and telling us about the homeless problem and what California has done to address it. Let's give it a watch.
No state, by the way, has done more as California in addressing this pernicious problem of homelessness plaguing cities and towns, not just across the state of California, but increasingly across the United States.
And so what I love about this is no state has done more to address, but did you fix it? Because if nobody's done more and you haven't fixed the problem, isn't that proof of the fact that government addressing a problem doesn't help? Didn't you just literally give me the pitch for less government? Because if nobody's done more to address something and it's not fixed, maybe you guys addressing something doesn't actually do anything. But, how many people were suckered by him and his handsome looks and his nice hair? Don't be fooled by people with nice hair. Just because he has nice hair and he says, oh, we addressed it. How many people were suckered by that? And then when we addressed it. All right. And I'll bring on Matt. I do want to cover this last topic, and then we will get some energy policy talk going. Matt, it's great to have you back with us. I know that you had more on your mind. Thank you for joining.
Absolutely. Run Your Mouth Nation. It's an honor to be back.
All right. So I want to cover this last topic. I'll be real quick about it, but this one, it's also just so hilariously government, where New York Times, will a $9 congestion pricing toll yield enough money to fix the subway? And I know I've talked about this before, and I know that this one is a personal gripe of mine, but the hilariousness that there is a preference amongst consumers for roads. And so more consumers want to use the roads. And so what you're going to do is you're now going to tax the roads that you have more money for the subways. Can you imagine any other business like this? The way it should work is that more consumers prefer the roads. You take the money from them and you make the roads better because that's what they prefer. But instead what they're doing is I now have to pay more for the product that I enjoy to subsidize the product that people aren't using because it's bad. I mean, it's the most, it's like it does not get any more government than that. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Matt?
Absolutely. No, it's hilarious. The governor came on recently and was like, we're saving you so much money by reducing the toll from 15 to 9, but they never actually went through with the 15 because
right, you're not saving me money. You haven't saved me money. Yeah, this is what's going to end up being the problem is it's like I'm annoyed about it because it's new. But the amount of money you spend getting into the city already, I think the George Washington Bridge like $15, and that's not the only bridge you're doing. The bridge coming, it's like driving into the city, and it's so funny. It's like I just bought the car, and now you're like, maybe I got to take the train. And you're like, but I just got the car. So then I started thinking, you know what? I don't even like driving in New York City because once you're in the city, it's kind of a pain in the ass. I used to ride my bike everywhere. I was like, maybe I'll start just going to the Upper West Side. I'll park the car. I'll start keeping the bike in the back. I almost prefer getting around that way. But then that's what's going to ruin the city the most is how many individuals like me start just trying to park their cars in the area that's outside of the congestion pricing. And I think there's going to be a mixture of less people wanting to come into the city. I'm sure you'll have some that maybe pivot back to you should almost be doctored in. Like I bought my car 3 days ago. You know what I mean? The way that they just come in with new laws and they ruin your shit. Where it's like you thought you made an economic calculation, and it's like small scale for me. We can get into this. This is what ruins businesses all the time, is that you could spend 10 years investing into some sort of a capital infrastructure project, and then all of a sudden they change the law where your $3 billion investment doesn't make sense anymore, which is what we got into the last time with the windmills.
Lots of that happening in nuclear too. Maybe we can get into some of that.
All right, let's take. I ignored the comments the entire time, so let's take a couple of quick comments, and then we can get into what we what we missed on the last appearance. First, we got Philly Libertarian with a brilliant idea here of Rob should buy his Ukrainian wife on Black Friday before Trump ends the war. That's true. Ukrainian bride prices are probably going to be going up. But on the same note, I bet you couldn't import the Russian brides for the last couple of years because you would have thought that they were spies. So as the Russian brides come back onto the market, it might equal itself out. All right. You know what? Philly Libertarian had a good one on that one. So we'll take this one also. They should make the ladyboy congressman use the handicap bathroom they keep on hand for Fetterman. I don't think anyone should have to share a bathroom with Fetterman. I think Fetterman should have his own private restroom that is specifically reserved just for Fetterman. And I bet you catch strokes. The same way that people's shit was like the most potent for COVID. I don't think anyone should have to be exposed to Fetterman's droppings because that's the way rodents spread disease. I bet that's how you catch strokes. Matt, I think that's just science, right?
Irrefutable.
All right. John Popek, Spririt also hired them because they only need to pay them 3/5 of the wage of a non-urban person. That's terrible. Stone 52, that man has optimized Diet Coke and McDonald's. No idea how he's alive, but he shouldn't change anything. Laughing my ass off. I know. That should be RFK Jr. Instead of getting the chemicals out of food, they should study Donald Trump to find out how he processes all the chemicals, and that should be the next Ozempic. For all the things that Donald Trump has sold, he should be getting into the supplement game and going, I take magnesium every morning, and because of this pill, combined with the Irish sea moss, Stephen taught me about it in the long shot, I combine that with magnesium and a couple other magical Donald Trump spices only available here. I can process McDonald's. I don't even need Ozempic. Okay, the doctors tell me nobody's been healthier ever in the history of the human race.
I definitely don't want to see the cell phone camera footage slipped under the wall from that scene.
There you go. All right. And then last one, Rachel Sly. They're selling the toll is the same way they sell inflation. They say inflation is going down, but really the rate that is going up has just decreased. It's still going up, just less than before. I agree. 100%. All right. Matt, coming back on the show, why don't we start reverse from the emails that you sent me with the bombshells, with the breaking news. And you said that Donald Trump had two excellent appointees last week that you're excited about, that you think is going to help lead to this boom of energy. And so I hand it to you. Why don't you tell us about the Donald Trump picks and why you're optimistic about them?
Right after we got done broadcasting last week, I see the Trump announcement of Chris Wright. So Chris Wright is a CEO of Liberty Energy, a fracking company.
Is that a buy now? I meant to buy it when the news came out. That's got to be a buy. Always bet on who's got the government in.
Yeah, I would imagine. And you know, he's just fantastic, super based. He's going to be the energy secretary. And, you know, a little bit about his background. He's worked on nuclear, solar, geothermal. And then in the 90s, he got into developing the technology for hydrofracking and his startups. And then ultimately Liberty Energy, which is the company he scaled. They were instrumental in making fracked gas, you know, a thing that we could do affordably and scalably in the U.S. Founded that company 13 years ago. They frack 20% of all the wells drilled in the U.S. and Canada, serve something like 100 million people around the world, getting clean cooking fuels from these wells. And his mission is basically to help the 2 billion plus people around the world that still don't have clean energy to be able to stop burning animal dung and actually get, you know, efficient, cost affordable, clean fuels.
You know, it's so interesting because usually I'm on the side of that it's all cronyism. People are trying to get into government to help their industries. But I guess in the case of natural gas, if you're just trying to create a regulatory environment that's more favorable for natural gas, do you see any cronyism or like just bad consequences of that? Are there, and like, because you had sent in one of the emails that natural gas is actually kind of the cheapest of all the energy options. But I don't know. So is it both typically cheaper and cleaner? Give me the nat gas story. I don't know anything about it.
It is basically the cleanest fuel you can possibly use, unless you're getting your energy from like a nuke plant. It's pretty much the cleanest you can use. Way cleaner than oil, way cleaner than coal, cleaner than wood, even certainly cleaner than the kind of low tech fuels that people are using, like animal dung and stuff like that. That's contributing to people, burning their eyes, getting eyesight problems in the third world. Asthma, all that kind of stuff. Gas is just worlds better than any of that.
And the natural gas, what is it like? Is it mostly used in power plants, or I don't know? Like, why can't I use that for like a car?
You actually can, and it's not actually that hard or expensive to retrofit your car to clean natural gas instead of gasoline. You do have to find the gas stations that provide compressed natural gas, which is like liquid natural gas that you can.
Is that potentially, from an environmental standpoint, a better play than what they tried with the EVs, which are not as recyclable and have a higher carbon footprint to create?
Yeah, I think if you compare like an EV to a just normal gasoline car, depends where you are in the country. Like if you're just getting nuclear and hydro as your main source of electricity, then the EV is going to be cleaner. But for most of the country, my understanding is that it basically balances out in terms of, pollutants emitted over the life of your vehicle. That's gasoline. Now, if you were to convert that to natural gas, which is way cleaner than gas, it would almost certainly be the cleanest way to power your car. Some folks are looking into trying to do hydrogen, but it's very costly, and the infrastructure to distribute it and store it is just not there yet.
And tell us a little bit of just the overall nat gas story, because I know the big talking point is that basically we went from being entirely reliant or largely reliant on oil imports to actually finding out that, wow, we've got a lot of this natural gas stuff, and then we became a net exporter. And I believe maybe other than Russia, we have we have the largest reserves. And that happened like end of the Obama administration, right? Can you just tell us what, like the big picture, what the U.S. natural gas story is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the U.S. is actually the biggest producer of oil and gas generally, like hydrocarbons as a whole. U.S. is the biggest, which is fantastic. In terms of the story, in terms of the energy mix for the US, like where do the electrons come from when you plug something into your wall? Kind of depends where you are. Maybe there's some hydro in there, like if you're in New York or the Pacific Northwest, got nuclear depending on where those plants are. But in terms of the hydrocarbons that made up the bulk of the electricity that was generated, at one point it was mostly coal. And then as gas pre-hydrofracking came online, it was roughly about 50-50, so half gas, half coal. And then once we started fracking, that just collapsed the price of natural gas. Natural gas essentially shut down all of the coal plants because they couldn't compete with just how affordable fracked natural gas is. That started happening in the 90s, really started to scale in the early 2000s. And at this point, coal has more or less, gas has more or less completely replaced coal. So gas.
If you're obsessed with the environmental carbon storyline, if natural gas is that much cheaper than coal, is there like a possibility that like China just starts buying so much natural gas from Russia that they don't have to pollute with coal in the same capacity? Or does that much natural gas not exist? Or is it just that like if fracking technology got better and we weren't blowing up, Russia's pipelines? I mean, that was going to Germany, not to, but even so, they got to now waste the infrastructure on shipping through Ukraine, or I guess making a new pipeline. But I'm curious, like, is there a finite, like, I even read years ago this conspiracy thing that was saying that oil is actually a replenishable resource, and it's because of a geothermal whatever. It's what's going on at the core of the earth is creating oil. It's not dinosaurs that got stuck in the ground. And so, like, there's actually, I wouldn't say infinite, but an abundant amount of oil. And, the whole peak oil storyline was a complete fabrication. Is natural gas something that replenishes that like we could potentially, is there like, and there's also just the growth standpoint of that the more we use something, the better we get at pulling it from places that were unprofitable, or the way the technology proves that we can get by, we can do more with less. But I'm curious, like how much natural gas is actually, available?
As far as I know, there is enough gas to do whatever we want to do for as far as we can think of. There is tremendous amounts that are available in the ground, and as our technology improves, we're able to get to it more cost effectively, like you said. Really, in terms of the countries and what they're using in terms of their mix, it really just kind of depends on where they are in their sort of evolution of capital accumulation in society. So the easiest thing to do is dig a hole, take chunks of coal, and burn them. And that essentially starts to allow you to have electricity, which then you're able to build up the industrial base of your society. As you get richer and more technologically advanced, then you can start doing things like producing fleets of the big trucks that will go and actually are the gas wells. So the truck, goes on site, deploys, drills down, and then, goes out horizontally, which is the fracking. And then you're able to get all of that oil and gas much more affordably. But you have to kind of develop that technology and have the resources available to build that kind of stuff.
All right. So first pick, Secretary of, and is that an actual position? There's so many government positions that they just slap a label on you. Does this guy actually do anything in this position?
Yeah, the energy secretary, couple of things. I want to talk about his kind of position, what he kind of hopes to do here. So where I want to go with this is ultimately ESG. But to give you a little background on the guy, he agrees that, look, of course humans are contributing to pollution and things like that, but he doesn't buy into the climate catastrophism and the existential threats that alarmists are claiming. All of the predictions that we've seen Al Gore and his ilk been making, and Greta, etc., that, it's the end of the world and Florida is going to be underwater by like 2015 and whatever. He obviously doesn't buy into that. He has a very realistic perspective on all that, which is very refreshing. He's also super anti-ESG. He's a staunch defender of property rights. I was listening to an interview in preparation for this. You're a loyal correspondent here doing some research. And I really liked what he said about that. He's saying, look, basically the reason why the shale revolution was able to take place in the US, and then we can then sort of export that around the world, that technology, is because of American property rights, right? We're the only country in the US where the farmers and the ranchers, you actually not only own the land, but you own the mineral rights for anything that's underneath the surface. And so that essentially allowed these, fracking technologies to have a place to frack the gas. And so that's really fantastic. Also, he's a proponent of federalism, where, no matter what New York and California are going to do with regard to banning your ability to access affordable energy, Pennsylvania and Texas, they're going to keep fracking and drilling and doing what we got to do to keep the American economy humming. And so I really liked what he said about all that. And most of all, I love what he's saying about ESG. So he has obviously a big public company. And the interview I was listening to, he's talking about Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, and the effort there to go net zero by 2050. And then the SEC is now like essentially buying onto all of that. So not only do you need to come up with an ESG report of what your score is to be able to get financing from BlackRock, but the SEC is also requiring that type of thing to be a publicly traded company. He sees that as a drastic overstep, far outside of the purview of what the SEC should be doing. They're looking into financial fraud, right? They shouldn't be in the realm of dictating climate policies and things like that. That just doesn't make sense. So
yeah, they tried to add that to the Federal Reserve, and it's like, guys, they already can't balance employment and interest rates and inflation. You're trying to throw the environment into the mix. So now what they're supposed to fire everybody and have no economy, and you know what I mean? Like, how are they supposed to balance that? That's not what they were there for. And they don't. I mean, not that I'm saying, hey, let the Fed control the interest rates and fight the inflation, because that's not working that well. But I prefer that to the Fed all of a sudden being the department of, hey, there's too much pollution, so we're shutting down the economy.
It's wild. And, as energy secretary, I really like that his focus is, totally dismissing the net zero by 2050 policy and instead focusing on
Drill, baby, drill.
Let's aim for zero energy poverty by 2050, right? Let's make the harvesting of cleaner, affordable, more economical energy resources so widespread, so easy to do, that the billions around the world that don't have access to energy, they are going to have access to energy by 2050, which I think is fantastic. He goes on to talk about,
maybe he'll call me up and he'll put me in charge of the bombing the windmills commission, and we can plan for 4th of July 2025 and make it the most spectacular 4th of July ever, where you bring your family to your closest windmill. We're going to strap it up with all the fireworks to get the thing just going in circles with the fireworks going. And then, the bombers are going to come in. We're gonna bomb off the windmill, and then we'll do the implosion thing into the water. And then what's going to happen after that? You think the show's over. You're like, I just got my money's worth. And then the whales are going to be so happy. You're just going to see them jumping like a second round of fireworks where they're like, good, I don't have to listen to that hum anymore.
I think that's how Trump should kick off his America's Fair, right? Maybe you saw the press release. He wants to create this fair.
I didn't see that, but that's great. I just see him, funnel cakes, more funnel cakes, not enough funnels.
And so he goes on.
And by the way, just the idea of Donald Trump walking around a America's Fair with RFK Jr., and RFK is just watching Donald Trump eat his way through the thing, like Homer Simpson, like, you know what I mean? Just just grabbing like the whole turkey leg. Oh man, I'd pay to watch that.
He can be a part of the Secret Service detail, running around with a sack of beef tallow. Runs up to the funnel cake stand, dumps out the seed oils, throws in the tallow, heats that up, and then that way Trump can have a nice, healthy funnel cake.
Be the funniest thing Trump could do? I just thought of this now, is he should just let Biden stay in the White House and not, just to let him pretend like he still has the job.
I love it.
Just to showcase how much dementia he had. You can give him a job as the official ice cream holder of the United States of America. And I would, if I was Donald Trump, I'd let him even keep the Lincoln bed that he was so obsessed with, how nice the Lincoln bed was. So long, very tall man. But that would, just daily, you still just see Joe Biden wandering in the back of cameras. Anyways, I'm sorry. I have ADD. Anything else that excites you about the new Secretary of Energy?
Yeah, I like, we were talking about, the federal government and basically their policies to try to, go towards this net zero policy. And he gives some really good examples, like, for example, in the UK, right? They went kind of all in on this. And they did indeed see a 40% reduction in their greenhouse gas emissions. But that's because energy got so expensive that everything essentially just left the UK. All the industry left the UK. So that 40% reduction in greenhouse gas was accompanied by an almost 30% reduction in the amount of energy that's consumed in the UK because all the industries left.
And so what is that? Is there any studies about how much that must have hampered their economy? I would just think...
it devastates it. Yeah, I mean, it's just taking a huge percentage of your economy, all those jobs, and they just shut down, right?
But not just that, I would think that the costs of energy across the board have to go up pretty drastically if you've reduced the supply by 30%. Well, no, you didn't reduce the supply. You just made it so expensive that there's 30% less consumption. I don't even know.
Yeah, and they're not, as generally speaking, energy consumption goes up over time, right? As we become more civilized, if you will, and more energy consuming devices, things like that, as we grow our industries. Not keeping up with that growth by being able to access more and more energy over time, that's a huge disaster. It's interesting. One last example for the UK. was they took a coal plant and retrofitted it to burn wood instead of coal, because wood is supposedly carbon neutral, right? So to get the fuel, to get the wood to burn in there, what they do is
You got to cut down a forest.
They clear cut forests in the southeast United States, load them onto a tanker, and then sail that over to the UK, bring the wood over to the coal plant, and then burn the wood there. And
that's, by the way, that's what I've said before, is that it's the problem of what actually gets counted for carbon consumption. So you can do something that on paper is carbon reducing, where there was a part of the process that actually used a lot of carbon, but since you're labeled by the government as a carbon reducer, that carbon consumption doesn't count. And then all of a sudden you and I start getting charged for the carbon usage where they didn't actually do anything that benefited the environment. By the way, just as a note, and I don't have a full picture. My general, my general outlook on the climate stuff, just to kind of give this short, is I do not have enough expertise, knowledge, research, or anything else to tell you to what extent man has a influence on the degree by which the climate may or may not be changing. And I will go so far as to say maybe we are having an influence and maybe the climate is warming because of what we're doing. The worst way that we could possibly continue to exist on Earth is to have government step in and try and reduce that. Because there's a natural way of technological development, of economic growth, that if we just continue to plow forward, we will have solutions to this. But one of the things that I remember reading is that there's a it's the opposite of the marginal utility, but basically the marginal destruction of carbon is reduced the more that we actually put into the environment. So to explain this concept to no one that understands it, like if I eat a meal and then I eat a piece of cake, that first piece of cake brings me a lot of joy. Second piece of cake, a little bit of joy. You get to the third piece of cake, there's no joy left. I don't need cake anymore. I'm full. If anything, it's because you put it in front. I'm like, why am I even eating this? And so my marginal joy of eating cake has decreased. So this is the opposite of that, where it's like the first, let's say, 1,000 tons of carbon we put in the environment might have an influence, but then by the time you get to the 10th, and by the time you get to the 11th, and by the time you get to the 12th, it doesn't do anything. And I bet amongst the climate scientists, if you say to them, hey, is what we're doing to reduce the carbon even going to have an influence, it seems to me more often than not, at best, it's some sort of a gesture to these people, a God that doesn't, God exists, and God rewards good behavior. Doing stupid shit there's going to be no afterlife because you reduced your carbon in a way that didn't make a difference because you wanted to pretend like you were making a sacrifice for the environment. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's like a religion to the left of gestures, but the gestures are not actually to a God and they're not actually religious or spiritual. So there's no point to the gesture, but they like to pretend it's like a stupidity of like, well, it's a step in the right direction. And as long as we're trying and we're making the gestures for the environment, that's like on the, the most forgiving side of that. They're just dumb, but I think it's actually more just influence of private interests who stand to profit off of their technology or their ownership of carbon credits in that infrastructure. Anyways, that was my ADD once again. I don't even remember what I cut you off about.
Yeah, it's virtue signaling. If I could just add to what you're saying about the carbon, you're absolutely right. So at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we had, 100 something ppm of carbon concentration in the atmosphere. At this point, we're up to about 400. And the way you can think of it is like, imagine you're wearing sunglasses, right? That first pair of sunglasses that you put on make a tremendous difference in the amount and reducing the amount of light that are hitting your eyes. Fantastic. Put on another set of sunglasses in front of that where you're already filtering out a ton of the light. So that second set doesn't really do much. And it's kind of the same with carbon. There's a sort of logarithmic scale where the first unit of CO2 in the atmosphere does indeed have this kind of greenhouse gas or this greenhouse effect. But at this point where we are, as you're adding more CO2 to the atmosphere, it really doesn't do anything in terms of increasing the greenhouse effect of the atmosphere. And I think that's really important for people to understand that any carbon reductions that we're doing at this point is just to make you feel good. It's taking the Aunt Jemima off the syrup bottle while still keeping, the corn syrup solids in there and whatever. to use that analogy.
Not to ADD too far, but I believe there was a book, Climate Alarmism, or it was from the guy who won like the Nobel Peace Prize with I think working with like Obama, like and Gene Epstein had brought this up. I read that book, but it was a little bit dense. I don't know how much of it I absorbed, and I'm always reluctant quoting Gene Epstein because more often than not I don't get it right, and I'll hear from him. But that's how you educate yourself. But he had said something along the lines of that during, I believe, the Industrial Revolution, it correlated with a cooling period, and so pointing to even like trying to graph out, hey, carbon has this this warming influence. The actual charting on that it does not correlate. I think it was something along those lines. Is that right?
Yes, you're absolutely right. So we're coming out of the ice age, a little ice age. Whatever happened in the dark ages or whatever that was. And so you're not accounting for all of the factors when you're trying to do this study. The planet was naturally warming. And so if it naturally warms a little bit more, that makes total sense. If human beings weren't here, it would indeed still be warming because we're in that part of the cycle.
Okay. And then one more just on the, hey, these people don't fucking know anything. I've also heard that the pollution has a dimming effect on the amount of sun that gets into the earth, and that we might have had a horrible, like an even worse heating period if it wasn't for actually the pollution in the environment, I guess, combating sun rays. I've heard something along those lines, and that carbon also has a greening effect of there being more trees, which consume carbon and then put out oxygen. And so that, like even the fears of carbon are kind of neutralized by this incredible gift of the earth that God gave us, and that we have a symbiotic relationship with trees, that you'll just get more trees.
No, you're absolutely right. It's interesting as the planet
I love
warms.
that. You come on the show every time to just say you're absolutely right as I pull random facts out of my ass.
100%. As the planet warms, right, more of the land starts to have greenery on it. More plants will start to grow. And there's this kind of natural dampening effect that, like,
my pubic hairs are denser.
As we're putting more carbon out, maybe it's having some kind of effect on the weather, although not nearly as much as the alarmists would like you to think. But even then, that means that, okay, now we're opening up, millions and millions of acres to be productive in terms of actually growing plants and things like that. That pulls the carbon out of the air, puts it into the ground. No, you're absolutely right.
All right, and now let's go to Trump's other pick that you were excited about.
Real quick, if you don't mind, I was talking about the UK in terms of Germany. Just one quick example. They were the industrial powerhouse of Europe. And because of their, energy policies, even before the Ukraine war, before the pipeline and all that kind of stuff, they had tripled their energy prices, right? And what was the effect of doing all this policy, making energy so expensive that it literally tripled? They went from 80% of their energy was derived from oil and gas to 74%. So basically almost a negligible return on their investment, and they tripled the price of energy as a result. And now they're kind of quietly changing that policy, not openly, but you can see in what they're doing. They're building new gas plants. They're building new liquid natural gas import terminals to get that cheap energy from the U.S.
You know what the pitch to Americans should be? You guys are trying to make the same energy decision as the people that supported Hitler.
Yes. And I just love that, our energy secretary, I mean, I'm basically quoting him here when I'm talking about all of this. This is his position on all this. So between all of that, as well as his ongoing lawsuits against the SEC to try to get rid of their climate disclosure rules, I think he's the right man at the right time in the right spot. I really think it's fantastic.
All right.
Last thing on him. You can go to his website, libertyenergy.com. He released a book earlier this year that I'm going to be diving into. I'll be sending you summaries of that in case you're interested. But yeah, libertyenergy.com, and you can get his presentation called Bettering Human Lives. It's beautiful, built for the layperson to read.
It's so funny because typically you tell me a politician or a guy getting into politics from a private industry wrote a book called Bettering Human Lives. I'm like, this sounds like some horse shit. But like I said, I was saying this on a previous episode with RFK Jr. And I forgot which other characters, but it's like it's hard to know because sometimes their interests can align with you, and sometimes it's almost like the way like a gun is neutral, bullets are neutral, technology is neutral. So like the way government has a overall negative influence on the marketplace, and that we don't just have the most valuable products rising to the top. And so a person needing to get into government in order to allow their industry to continue, it's kind of neutral. You can have bad players doing it, or you can have good players doing it. I haven't personally delved into this guy, so I can't tell you which camp he's in, but based off of like ESG scores, I can tell you right off the bat, hey, this makes less sense. It sounds to me like you're giving a handout to certain industries and we're going to be overwhelmingly poorer. This sounds to me, based off at least this conversation, that natural gas is marketably better and that it's cheaper, more available, and cleaner. So I guess a person from that industry hijacking government in order so that we could have more of the good thing sounds better.
It's just going to get better. It's going to make, the cleaner fuels easier to get and more economical. That's essentially like, if you think about what's happened over the last 30 years, it was the market that cleaned up our power generation fleet and drastically reduced pollutants. It wasn't the federal government doing that, right? Yeah, maybe they can pretend to jump in front of that parade and say they're responsible for it, but the parade was already marching, right? And the more freedom we have to be able to develop these technologies and try them out and see what scales, the quicker we're going to get to, a more sustainable future. When we were just changing gears here, when we were talking last week, we knew that Doug Burgum, I think former governor of North Dakota, had been picked as the Interior Secretary. Since then, more details have came out, and it's looking like some really positive improvements here. Hopefully, we'll see. But in addition to being the Interior Secretary, Doug Burgum is also going to be the Energy Czar. So Obama and Biden, they had a new position they call the Climate Czar. Trump is repurposing that, calling that the Energy Czar. And then in that role, he's going to head a new organization they're building called the National Energy Council, which will oversee all of the energy related agencies. So now they're all essentially going to be aligned, and you'll be able to kind of dictate policy from there. And I really like what he's saying. In this role, Burgum is expected to eliminate or reduce subsidies for energy generally, like particularly renewables and EVs. But I think just trying to like level the playing field in terms of, the technologies that the government's picking. He's looking to reduce some of the regulations that have hampered our ability to run our power plants. So under Obama and Biden, they keep ratcheting up the regulations, making it prohibitively expensive to generate electricity. He's looking to roll that back so we can stop with that nonsense. Roll back the fees that have recently been imposed on methane emissions, which makes everything more expensive. And, just real quick on that, it's interesting as the government, imposes these regulations and introduces these new fees, all it does is make it more expensive to get these fuels out and to run them in the power plants. But you still need those fuels. You still need those power plants. And so what it results in is record profits for the energy companies and the power producers, which is like kind of not what you would think it would be, right? You would think it would eat into their ability to make money and stuff like that. But we need it, right? Like the populace is not going to stand for blackouts. And so we need to keep having these power plants run. And as a result, it just makes it better for the energy companies, which is wild. So
I got to ask, why didn't that happen with the legislation that they put in England that you just, there's a bit of an economic equation there of, at what point do you, I guess, raise prices that it actually influences consumption? So I guess you're saying to the degree that the environmental regulation in the United States increases the cost, it's like it's not even taxed and going to government. It's just going to the profits of the company that are forced to charge more. But why? I guess it's just in your head, it's just not expensive enough to actually decrease demand.
Well, as we saw in Europe, it did get so expensive that their industry left. and then went to China where they can just burn coal
Right.
instead of burning cleaner fuels in Europe. So yeah, for the most part, demand is inflexible, right? So it doesn't really matter what it costs. You need to heat your home, keep your pipes from bursting, things like that. Yeah, so the demand doesn't really go down regardless of price. So it's kind of the same for
the demand
for
is
with your cars.
So the demand is more that producers will just move their factories, but
Yeah,
it hasn't increased enough in the U.S. to have that effect.
To some degree, a lot of our industrial base is now offshore. So hopefully we can get some of that back.
All right, so let's move. So that's what was the guy's name? Doug. What was his name?
Burgum as Interior Secretary and Climate or Energy Czar. And the one more thing that he's looking to do is, it's interesting. California, with its like super strict sort of environmental regulations, particularly on cars, what auto manufacturers end up doing is they end up building the car to pass California's emission standards, and then just sell that same car across the U.S. because it would cost them more to have a California car and then a rest of the U.S. model. And so that's another thing Burgum's looking to tackle, is figuring out how to.
And it's not just cheaper to just not sell a car in California.
It's got such a big population. I guess the calculation is no, it's not.
All right. So let's do 5 minutes on this last topic because I got to pee pretty bad. But I know that there was one other than the two picks. There was one other thing that you were excited about. I think with the nuclear technology that you had emailed me about.
I did. That's kind of a bigger topic.
So we can revisit it then.
Okay. Yeah. What I want to do, just a preview, is essentially kind of expose to the audience how everyone's been being taken advantage of here. We could be decades into a nuclear renaissance, like 50 years into a nuclear renaissance. The promise, I don't know if it would actually happen, is energy too cheap to meter. But the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has essentially completely stifled that. And I want to get into some of the history there and just give you some concrete examples of how this is adding billions and billions of dollars to the cost of every plant that they build, and why it doesn't need to be that way.
All right, teaser. Maybe even next week, Wednesday, we'll do another segment on the back half of the show on how the nuclear regulations have increased your costs on everything.
Awesome. Robbie, thanks so much. I encourage everyone to follow me on X at asthemeterturns. My name is Matt Wallace. If you're in the industry, look me up on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/n/Matthew-Wallace. I'd love to hear from you if you're in the industry. I've got a couple speaking gigs coming up. I'll be at the Sunspec conference in California in a couple of weeks. And I'm an expert panelist on another webinar coming up for the Utility Telecom Council. So looking forward to doing those.
Excellent. And if not next week, we'll have you back shortly to address how nuclear regulation has made everything more expensive. Nice and concise.
Indeed.
All
awesome.
right. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Mr. Matt.
Always. Thank you, Robbie.
And that is our episode, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will be back with the breaking news of who's shitting in what toilets and when. Forget the nuclear talk. We're sticking to turds. Matt, you're gonna have to come on in 2 weeks. We're diving into turd talk next week. Where the trannies are going to the bathroom and other important topics. Maybe back this weekend for another episode because I don't have any road gigs, so we'll see what's going on. But that is our show. Go check out my special if you haven't watched it yet. And thanks to the sponsors, YoKratom and Sheet.com. Catch everybody later.